About meditation, the technique of practicing meditation is simple. It's simple, and it takes a few minutes. If you look up the technique for practicing meditation anywhere, it shouldn't take more than 5 minutes for somebody to describe the technique. And the technique that we use in this class has kind of ended up being the Zen approach to meditation. And the reason for that is because Zen focuses on meditation as the primary vehicle for self-realization. It's called Seizen in Zen meditation. And the technique is very simple. It's the one that I described before we did the practice today. But the goal of this class, and the goal for anybody who is interested in meditation, is to establish a practice. And that's more important than the technique, in the sense the technique could take 5 minutes to talk about. The practice could take the rest of your life to talk about, in terms of the subtleties of the practice as you get further into it. But in the beginning of the practice, the primary goal is to establish consistency. Right? That's the primary goal, because consistency is everything in the practice of meditation, because the formal practice of meditation is the beginning. It's the beginning of learning and coming into contact with the truth. It's the beginning of learning and coming into contact with your true nature. It's the beginning of learning to establish yourself as a practitioner, as a spiritual seeker, as someone who begins to appreciate the possibility that you can experience yourself and your life in a way that allows you to discover your natural ability to be happy and your natural ability to function in the world with clarity, and your natural ability to experience contentment and spontaneity. All the things that really are the bottom line for a good life. So you could say, that the practice of meditation is a practice that involves a teaching that goes along with the practice, that helps you to deepen your understanding of the concepts that need to be being developed along with the practice of meditation. Because in the practice that we're using here, in the practice that I'm teaching here, the purpose of the practice is not just stress reduction. It's not just to be somebody who's cool because you're a meditator. No, the practice, the way that it's being taught here, is the beginning of a psychological and emotional process. It's the beginning of a psychotherapeutic process if you do it correctly. Because if you stick with it and you establish a meditation practice, it will change your personality. In the long run, it'll change your personality. In the long run, your personality will start to be more like and more consistent to your true nature as awareness itself. So, questions about meditation practice, the teachings? Yes?
So, I thought we had always said that you're still going to be your personality. It's just you're going to recognize it as a personality, not that you're going to change it. No?
Well, it will change, but you're not going to change it. So that's the difference. The teachings that coincide with the practice of meditation help us to begin to discover that we were not who we thought we were. And as you practice meditation and you begin to deepen that discovery and you begin to experience what it's like to be you, meaning that when you're not in the thinking activity, right, when you're practicing meditation and you move attention from the thinking activity to the body breathing, that's the opportunity to practice being, B-E-I-N-G, being. And being is referring to the idea that you are awareness, that you are consciousness itself. And when you're experiencing that, you're being yourself. You're being yourself. It's like you're a verb, you're an energy, right? Like that. The personality is not what you are, and you will discover that through the practice and through the teachings, right? And when you discover that and you begin to understand the difference it makes not to identify with either the physical body or the personality, you begin to come into the understanding of your true nature and the possibility of living your life as that rather than a limited version of yourself called the personality. So the personality will stay. The personality will not go anywhere because you need the personality as a way of being in this world and relating to other people. It'll stay. The thing about it changing is you will stop trying to get better or improve by changing the personality, and rather than that, you'll experience your true nature, who you actually are, and to the degree to which you experience that true nature consistently, the personality will change to express that instead of just your conditioning. Gabish? Well, because the personality is not interested in meditation. In fact, it's antagonistic to meditation. It resists meditation. And the reason that it does that, and when I say the reason that it does that, I'm not referring to the personality like it's alive. It's not alive, right? It's a program. But the program is designed to resist anything that threatens its existence. And that's why the personality doesn't want to meditate. Because the personality is a conditioned, learned reality about who you are that you took on, that you identified with, that you lived as. It hasn't worked out that well, right? And so that's one of the reasons that you're interested in this process. But if you succeed in practicing meditation, the personality will lose its position as you, right? So if you succeed in practicing meditation, the personality will resist it because you're leaving the system. When you're practicing meditation and you move your attention from the thinking activity to the awareness of the body breathing, you're leaving the system. The system is over here. It's the thinking activity, and it's within that system and thinking activity that the personality exists. And so if you leave that system, warning lights will go off in the system, that you've left home. You've vacated the system, right? And that will threaten the existence of the personality because the personality doesn't have a real existence. It doesn't have consciousness. It's a program. And you've identified with it, and you've been living as that, and now you're discovering and learning that that's not the truth. So what we're talking about here is the truth, and the truth is what is real. The truth is what doesn't change. And so the truth of who we are is awareness or consciousness. That's real and it doesn't change. And for us to learn to identify with the truth of ourselves allows us to come out of a much smaller, limited version of what we are, and allows us to have access to the ability to be with any situation that occurs in our life calmly, consciously, without resistance. And this is a far superior way of being in the world. It's wisdom-based. It's not just based on knowledge. It's wisdom-based, right? So the reason the personality resists meditation is because the personality is threatened by it. The program that the personality is threatened by it. And so that program will automatically produce thoughts and emotions that will help you not to meditate. And that is one of the challenges of meditation, especially for somebody who's beginning to practice. If that's the hump, that's what I call the hump, right? If you can get past your mind's attempts to stop you and start to train your mind to work for you instead of try to control you, right? Then you're out of the woods. Yeah, for most human beings, the mind is the master, meaning that they follow their thoughts. They follow what they think are their thoughts, right? And they follow their emotions as well, right? And so when you practice meditation, you discover that this is not a good idea. The mind is not related to reality. It doesn't have consciousness, right? So in that sense, it's dumb. It's a dumb program, and it cannot respond to new situations. It can only play old songs. It can only play patterns of behavior from the past, right? The biggest issue, the biggest barrier to successfully establishing a meditation practice is ignorance, right? People don't know what they're doing. They start to practice meditation, they don't know what they're doing. They don't have a teacher. They don't have any guidance. They don't know how to deal with their mind. And if you don't know how to deal with your mind, you will not succeed in dealing with your mind, because it'll produce just the thoughts that it needs to produce to get you to follow it, just like it always has, right? You know, the old example that Muji uses, you know, where you open the refrigerator and there's a chocolate cake in there, and the voice in your head, right, says, okay, let's have some of that cake, right? And you know, and then the voice says, maybe you shouldn't do this. Maybe you shouldn't do this. You don't need the calories, and you know that's not your cake. And then the next thing that the voice says is, oh, it's probably okay. Go ahead and taste it. Nobody will ever know, right? And so then you put your finger into the icing and taste the great chocolate cake, and then that same voice says, you shouldn't have done that. This is the dilemma, you know. The voice in your head turns on you, doesn't it?
Plays tricks on you.
Plays tricks on you. It invites you to do things, right? And then when you do them, it says, oh, you're bad. You know, you're so bad. Why did you do that? You see? See, that's one of the things about what you're talking about. When you reflect on a situation that's already passed, where you lost it, right? And you were just being your personality, and you were reacting, and you were saying stupid stuff, and you were behaving in a stupid way. And then you look back on it, right? Now watch, this is very important. You look back on it and say, oh man, I messed up. I really lost it. And that's especially bad for me because I'm a meditator. I should know better. You know, I'm a spiritual person. I'm not just an average person. So that makes me feel much worse. You see? But you see, you didn't notice the personality stepped in. Stepped in, right? So the personality stepped in and is like having you feel bad about how you failed, right? And that may help you to stop practicing meditation, you see? So you have to really be careful, because part of the learning process here and part of the teaching is you've got to establish a way to be present to your own inner experience. You have to establish a way to be present to your own thought activity, your own emotional activity, so you could start watching it instead of just acting from it. Start looking at it and see, does this feeling fit what's going on in front of me here? Does it make sense for me to let the anger lead me, to tell me what to say and do? Now, you guys have been around long enough to know how that goes, right? When you're enraged, right, you are experiencing the energy of hate, right? When you're enraged, you're experiencing the energy of hate. And the way that system works is it has you see whatever appears to you, occurs to you to be causing that rage, to be Putin, to be the enemy, right? That's the way they occurred to you. You know, if you really look in your life, there were times when people did things around you when you saw red, right? And after that, you were on automatic, you know. The system pulled up the worst things you know to say, right? Or worse, right? And you start being in combat, don't you? That's why recently I've been saying, you know, this whole thing of war, like everything else, right, can be an opportunity for those of us who are practicing meditation and studying the teachings, right, to look and see what is that reflecting about us personally as human beings, right? Because the reality of it is, if every human being on the planet, right, awoke, if every human being on the planet woke up and was experiencing who they really are, the truth, right, there couldn't be a war. Who would fight? Who would go to war? If individual human beings were able to experience peace, there would be no way to act out war. The only way to act out war is we're all warlike. This is where humanity's in denial. You know, they look at the war. Oh, it's terrible. Oh, it's terrible. You know, they should kill Putin. There should be peace. You know, this is just you know, the schoolyard conversation, right? But nobody's really looking into this more deeply and say, why is there still war? You know, why are we still killing each other because we have different ideas? Why is that still going on? And the answer to that, the Dalai Lama pointed out the answer to that. He said it's because you as an individual human being are at war. Until you find peace in your life, until you stop being in conflict with the people around you, when you stop being in conflict with life itself, when you stop being in conflict with your own self, right? So one of the things about this process of practicing and learning is to have the audacity to take a look at yourself, to see, is that true? Am I in conflict with life? Am I in conflict with life? Well, the way you answer that question is start paying attention and watch how often you reject what's happening. What's happening is life, isn't it? How often do you reject what's happening? How often do you say, oh, I don't like this? See, if you start paying attention, you'll see that you're rejecting life all the time. All the time. You wake up in the morning, oh, I don't want to wake up. That's rejecting life, right? Go to work. I don't want to go to work. That's rejecting life, right? You get in your car, right? It's too cold. That's rejecting life. You get into traffic. Too much traffic. That's rejecting life, right? You have a headache. You don't like it. That's rejecting life, right? You have no idea. More than not, human beings are rejecting reality. More than not, they're rejecting life, right? And if you start to pay attention, you'll see it happening. You'll see that you are, the way you're being in the world and the way the world occurs for you has you being at odds with life, has you resist life, has you fight with life, has you be at odds with the people you love, has you fight with them, has you resist them, and so forth. And the evidence for that is pretty clear, right? Not only is the evidence for that clear in terms of how many people end up going to a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a counselor, right? Right, and that's a very, very small percentage of the people that need to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, right? Because they can pay for it, right? And a lot of people don't have insurance, right? And a lot of people, and the majority of people still feel it's stigmatizing to get help. And so they don't do it, right? So what do? Well, they drink booze, they smoke pot, right? They overeat, right? What else? Watch TV. And when I say watch TV, I'm not saying watch a specific program on TV. I'm saying watch that box talk, is the way a lot of people watch TV. A lot of people wake up in the morning and turn the TV on and have the TV on all day, because it's like company, right? It's a social situation. You have a social relationship with a box, okay? So there are a lot of ways that people, what's that?
Social media.
Social media now, the internet. I mean, there's 1,000,001 ways, right, to lose yourself, right, in the mess. There's 1,000,001 ways to do that, right? So that's the way it is. The majority of people, are doing something to avoid life, are doing something to avoid the suffering and the pain of life, rather than deal with that, rather than look at it and see, what is this suffering? Instead of being worried about controlling it and stopping it, how about look at it and ask, what is this suffering? Where does this suffering come from? Really, where does this suffering come from? And what we talk about here and what the teachings tell us the suffering comes from your resistance to life is where the suffering comes from. Anything that happens in your life that you think that shouldn't happen, that's going to cause suffering. And it goes back to what I said earlier. If you really paid attention, if you really watch what's happening in your life, moment to moment, right, you'll start to see the real source of the suffering. The real source of the suffering is that you're trying to get your version of life to play. You know what I mean? You're trying to get the way you think it should happen to be the way it happens, but it never works out, right? No, the way it happens is the way it's happening, not the way you think it should happen. And every time you run into that conflict, right, you suffer. You suffer. You suffer when the people around you don't behave the way they're supposed to, right? You suffer when you don't behave the way you're supposed to, right? You punish yourself if you don't meet your own standards, right? So there's plenty of suffering to go around. There's more suffering than anything else in the world, right? There's more suffering than anything else in the world. So there's suffering, there's the symptoms that it causes, and then there's the actions that people take to try and avoid it and control it, right? Therein you have trillions of dollars being passed every day, right? So what this is about is coming out of it. This is about looking and seeing what the suffering is, right? Starting to pay attention to it as it's occurring, and allowing yourself to start to let go of the attachment, to the ideas you have about the way life should be and the way you should be and the way other people should be. And if you let go of the attachment to that, and you have an open mind, and you're willing to receive some new input, and you're willing to practice meditation, you can come out of that crazy reality. You can go sane. You can come out of that crazy reality. You can start to see what you really are and understand that you don't need protection. You don't need protection. That's one of the beauties of consciousness, is that it cannot be harmed, right? So there's a lot involved in this process. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to require you being a student that continues to study the teachings. And there's plenty of opportunities to do that now, you know, especially with the internet. It's so easy. And in this class, I've written 2 books while I've been teaching this class, right? So there's 2 resources there. These YouTube videos of the talks are available. Right now, there's almost 300 of them available on YouTube. So you have plenty of resources. You have that. You could just Google, you know, meditation. You could just Google Eastern philosophy or Eastern teachings or Zen or Hinduism or mystical Christianity or Richard Rohr or Rupert Spira or Mooji, or, you know, or Paul Hederman. I mean, you know, there's the list is a long list, and it's getting longer all the time. So you have more research, you have all the resources you need to come out of the suffering and start to wake up and experience what's possible for you in life. Yeah, the truth that I'm speaking of is only an experience. Concepts are necessary. Language is necessary. Language is concepts, right? Because that's what we got to communicate with, right? But it's very important to understand that those concepts are not the truth. The concepts are useful because they can point to the truth. If I say, for example, to make the point, I think I mentioned this the other day, when people are talking about what's the difference between a concept and the experience, one way of understanding that is if you go to a restaurant and you're looking at the menu, right? And on the menu, you see the word hamburger, right? But you don't take the menu and start eating it, right? Yeah, that's the same thing as a concept. You can't experience a concept. You can't experience the word hamburger, right? So the menu is not the food, right? The concepts are not the truth, right? That's the distinction, right? So that's why when we're practicing meditation, when you move attention from the thinking activity to the awareness of the body breathing, you're leaving concepts. You're leaving concepts and you're moving to experience, right? And what you're experiencing and it gets even more interesting, because what you're experiencing when you're experiencing your actual self, the awareness that you are, right, is nothing. You're experiencing nothing. So right away, a lot of people are going to say, oh, wait a minute. Don't tell me I'm experiencing nothing. How can I experience nothing? Well, the truth is you've been experiencing nothing since you were born. That's what I meant in the past when I said human beings are a one-trick pony. They think that thinking is the only possibility, right? Right, so people don't know how not to think, even though not thinking is much more powerful than thinking. Well, the way this works, right, is it starts out with you thinking you're a person, right? Thinking you're a person, thinking you have to do something in time to get from where you think you are to where you think you want to be. That's all thinking, right? But the experience of who you actually are was going on all along while you're doing that, right? So the process is one in which you start out as a person, right? And then you proceed as a person, right? To learn more and practice more as a person, right? At some point, there has to be an event, a revolutionary event, right? In which all your actions and attempts as a person to discover and experience who you are and the truth of reality, right? There has to come a time when your frustration begins to build. You familiar with this? Your frustration starts to build. You start to get impatient, intolerant with this whole thing. I've been doing this for 6 months. I've been doing this for 2 years. How come I'm not enlightened yet, right? So that process has to go like that, right? And then what has to happen is you have to give up. You have to give up. You have to stop trying to be what you already are. You have to stop trying to be what you already are. And when you stop trying to be what you already are, you might notice it. You might just run into it, right? Because it's always the case. It's always the case, right? And all you have to do to notice who you are is stop, be quiet, Be still and you will know that I am God. Be quiet, start to give your attention to the source. Start to give your attention to what's been looking through your eyes. Start to give your attention to what's been using your ears to listen. Start to give your attention to what's been using your hands to touch. And just follow it back. Follow it back, follow it back. And what you will get to is nothing. And the nothing you will get to is an experience, right? It's not a concept. It's always going on. It has no form, it has no shape, it doesn't exist in time, right? And it's not a thing, that's why I say nothing, right? But it's real, and it's conscious, and it's awake, and it's alive, right? And it's what you are. And when you have that experience, right, and then you go back and be a person again, because you have to, right? You have to. When you go back and be a person, it's a transformation. You may go back and be a person, but you're being a person, right? It's not what you are. You are awareness now. Now you've opened up a whole new realm of possibility. Now your awareness being a person. Okay? That's so different from just being a person. Because the person's limited, right, to the conditioning and all that jazz, right? But the awareness is unlimited. So once the awareness or the consciousness comes into play, now the person starts to go to school and really learn how to be a human being in a way that works. So you can be happy, content, satisfied, and effective, right? And the beauty of this is that the process happens on its own. I used the word the other day, fermentation, right? When the right conditions come together, right? The seed of Buddhahood, the seed of awareness, the seed of consciousness, right, that exists in you, when the right conditions come together, it's like watering the plant, right? Watering the seed, right? So meditation is like watering the seed. Learning the wisdom teachings is like watering the seed. And if you start to do that, the right conditions exist and the fermentation starts, right? The process of awakening begins to happen. And like Richard Rohr said the other day, no matter what you do, once that starts, if you keep doing what you're doing that creates that condition, nothing can stop it. Nothing can stop it. Like Richard Rohr said the other day, he said, I did everything wrong. That's what brought me to spirituality. Right? And I resisted the process every step of the way, but in spite of myself, I woke up. In spite of myself, I realized my true nature. So that's the good news, right? It's not up to you. That's the good news. If it was up to you, I don't know. But it's not up to you. All you have to do is understand the concepts, understand the possibility, do the practices, become a student of this, and then that process will start. And I know that there are people here who have been here long enough that have seen what I'm pointing to. Have seen what I'm talking about. That you're far enough along now that you can see there's a process going on. You can see, that there are moments that you're awake that you weren't awake before. You can see there are situations that you find yourself in now that in the past you would be really upset and act stupid, and you don't do that anymore. You might even start to stop doing what you were doing to avoid experiencing reality. It's a gradual process. It'll happen by itself. You don't need to worry about that. And that's a good news because it doesn't depend on you. It depends on the truth and it depends on who you actually are, not who you think you are. Yeah, so I really appreciate the fact that you guys have obviously caught on enough to this to continue to come to class regularly. And I really invite you to do that, to make sure you establish a practice for yourself, that you become a student of meditation, and then you'll start to be able to get the benefits of all that.